Hello everybody, this is Dr. Cole. It's Sunday afternoon, January 26th, and this will be the week 3 video for Political Science 1013 for the spring 2025 term for the 16-week section. Everybody, I have splotches all over my face. I saw the dermatologist earlier this week, and he wanted to remove some things, little splotches from my face, so don't worry, it'll be fine. It'll heal up in a week or so, I'm sure. But anyway, your exam is coming up Friday the 7th, February 7th. That's 1 week from this coming Friday. Units 1 and 2 will be covered on the exam, plus a number of readings you've been asked to access online. Please don't forget that. And I might say, everyone, if you have not done so already, please try those links, and you might want to try those, print those articles out. There are 4 of them. Don't wait until the last minute on that, because there will always be students who have trouble getting those links to come up. And if that is the case, I can see about getting that material to you. Contact me, but don't wait until the eve of the test to see about that. You want to take a look at that stuff and start going through it now. So, look, we've talked about Unit 1 on political participation. I want to begin now and continue next time, talk about Unit 2 on political parties and pressure groups. We'll talk about parties today and pressure groups next time, because the material divides pretty neatly that way. Both parties and pressure groups are organizations that try to influence the government in different ways. With political parties, of course, the idea is to run candidates for office and get control of the government. So we start out by talking about what political parties do, and we compare our elections to the school elections you might be familiar with. The problem there is, very often what you have is a contest between personalities. They say schools do this to get you accustomed to the idea of elections. It's part of your political socialization, you might say. But if there were no political parties, our elections might be nothing more than contests between personalities to see who's the most popular. But if you have some idea of what the political parties are and what they stand for, then you can cast a fairly informed vote, even if you don't know much more about what's going on than that. Okay, so you might say, the political parties give us a way to make our participation meaningful. They give us some idea of what's at stake. Another thing they do, practically speaking, is to aid in the organization of the legislature. We say we have majority and minority leadership in both the House and the Senate in the United States. And at this time, the Republicans have the majority in both. They have a fairly narrow majority, especially in the House. But we would say in both the House and the Senate at this time, the Republican leaders make up the majority leadership, and the Democratic leaders are in the minority. And that would be true on all the committees and subcommittees too. The Republicans will be chairs of all the committees and subcommittees in both the House and the Senate, because they have the majority in both of those chambers. And the highest ranking Democrat would be considered the ranking member on each committee and subcommittee. That is, the member who would be the chair if his or her party were in the majority. We should also mention, everybody, we need to remember the Speaker of the House is considered the leader of both his or her party and the House of Representatives as a whole. We will say more about that at the end of the term when we get to Unit 8 on the Congress. We might also say that the political parties help us with conflict resolution, both between the parties and within each party, especially in the United States, because we only have 2. And normally there's a range of views within each, and not everybody in each party agrees with each other. That's rarely the case. So we need the parties to help us settle conflict between the parties and within each party. Among the things, the functions that political parties perform. We talk a bit about the structure of each party. The party organization is very decentralized. There are state, local, and national parties. And there's not much of a hierarchy of command from top to bottom. The state and local parties are pretty independent of the national party. At the national level, you have the National Convention, which is the legislature of the party, you might say. But the convention meets only for a few days every 4 years. So in the meantime, you have the National Committee and the national chair of each party. Now, coming up, what's happened is, traditionally, the chair of the party who loses the presidential election steps down, and that has happened in the Democratic Party. Okay. This Saturday, there will be an election for the new DNC national chair. And once that takes place, I'll get a message out about it. Your class notes mentioned something about that, but the new chair has not yet been chosen. That'll be chosen in a vote of the DNC this Saturday the 1st. Now, we go on to talk a great deal about the history of the parties, going back to the days of President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the Depression and World War II years, the 1930s and 40s. The parties took on the character they have today at that time, although there's been considerable change in the meantime. And we try to go through a good deal of history of that. Also, everybody, before we get to that, we talk about the issue of why it is we have only 2 major parties and not more than 2. And you'll notice we put that down to what I call the rules of the game. Basically, the reason is we don't have proportional representation in the United States. We have a system of single-member districts. By way of comparison and contrast, we look at the last election in Germany in 2021, which produced 6 parties represented in their legislature, the Bundestag. It so happens we're about to have another election in Germany in just a few weeks, next month in February. But that's a good basis for comparison. So we talk about the issue of why we have only 2 major parties and a bit about the history of the parties. Now, everybody, you reach aside a page in the class notes called "The Parties in the 21st Century, What's at Stake?" And I try to look at the composition of the 2 parties today, now that we're a quarter of the way through the 21st century, as compared to back in the 1930s and 40s. And it's kind of complicated. And we go through several dimensions, or you might say issues or aspects of the difference between the Republican and the Democratic parties as things stand in the year 2025. So take a close look at that, which comes toward the end of your class notes on political parties, where the political parties part ends and we move on to pressure groups, which we'll talk about next time. Now, before we go, let me say one thing, everybody. I revised these class notes a week or 2 before the presidential inauguration. One thing we talk about in the class notes is what we have between the 2 parties is, to some extent, traditionally it's been a division between business and organized labor, but recently it's also been a division between what I call old money and new money. Old money being sectors of the economy like oil and gas, and perhaps agriculture also, which are predominant in our part of the country, which goes a long way perhaps to explaining why the Republicans are so strong in our part of the country. By new money, we very often mean big money associated with the tech sector. But students may have noticed at the inauguration, several of the big tech company executives were there right alongside Donald Trump. Elon Musk was there, Mark Zuckerberg was there, Jeff Bezos was there. For want of a better term, those people and their detractors of those people said that basically what they were doing is, if you will, sucking up. And that may be the case to some extent. But whatever happened, it looks as though these people have shifted their allegiances a little bit Elon Musk purchased Twitter, changed it to X, and changed some of the ways the platform operates in such a way that some people think it's become more favorable ground for Donald Trump supporters and conservatives. Zuckerberg put a new policy in place to stop content moderation on his platform, at least in the way it had been done. It had been farmed out to third-party groups. And conservatives felt this has often resulted in their views being censored. So, it's really too soon to say, I think, that the tech sector has shifted from left to right, because all this has only happened within the past week or two now. Late last year, you can maybe begin to see a move in that direction. One thing about it is you have the CEOs, but then you also have all their employees in Silicon Valley, in the San Jose, California area. And if the CEOs have moved, I doubt that the many employees have moved quite the same way. For instance, if you look at your class notes on the media, we talked about what happened after the George Floyd killing. The New York Times ran an op-ed by Senator Tom Cotton that essentially said it may be time to send in the troops. And many people working for the Times were offended by that, and the paper eventually backed away from it. And its editorial page editor eventually had to leave the paper. Now, to the best of my knowledge, the pressure on the New York Times to do that came to some extent from its readers and also maybe from some of its reporters, but largely from the tech employees that the New York Times had brought in to help it go digital, not just print. Okay. Many of those employees were political progressives, and they took issue with the remarks that Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas had made in that op-ed that appeared just a few weeks after the George Floyd killing in Minneapolis in 2020. So I'm going to hold off on my judgment, on making any judgment that the tech sector has moved to the right. There's some indications that the CEOs may be doing that. But as far as the sector as a whole, I want to reserve judgment on that. Well, anyway, everybody, next time I'll talk to you, I believe it will be Sunday the 2nd. And at that time, what we'll try to do is go through the class notes on pressure groups. We'll say a little bit about those 4 online readings you've been assigned in preparation for our exam, which will take place, I believe, Friday the 7th now. So we'll be talking to you a little bit about that on Sunday the 2nd, 1 week from today. So, study hard, take it easy. We'll talk to you a week from now before the exam. In the meantime, you can reach me through the course website or at david.cole@opsu.edu. Take it easy.